Hello there, everybody. It's always a little bit weird to be in this format where I'm on a big screen. I wish I could be there with you in person, but I can see you guys through the camera. If you look to your left, there's a camera there that just pointed to you. Yep, I can see you. And actually, I can show yourselves how you look to me. That's how I see you. So just so you can get a familiarity about, yeah, there you go. Now you can see the camera. So my view of you and your view of me. Thank you. It's very nice to be with you today virtually. I wish I could be there in person, but this is just the world we live in now, isn't it? We are separated by time and distance, and we feel a little bit more closed off. I feel a little bit more less able to actually have the skills to be in person with people. I'm just alone all the time in front of a camera. I just taught class just before this in the same home studio that I've built over these past 2 years. And I went directly to a conference to see you. So there are some good things that are coming about during this pandemic as far as being able to, touch the lives of people all over the world. But we're losing some of those things, a lot of those things like the minister talked about yesterday in the keynote initial address, like building character, having those little um, social interactions that we kind of take for granted. And so today I want to talk to you about how we can get some of that back. Uh, what happened here in Japan, and what I suspect happened in many places, especially where you are as well and where you teach, when COVID hit, is we didn't go necessarily to online teaching. That's a whole different area of study and takes a lot of time and effort to develop online platforms and curriculum. We went to something called emergency remote teaching, which we often do with technology, where we take what we're doing now and we kind of project that into a new technology. We saw this in the beginning of the internet, right? Where we had Web 1.0, and where we used websites as magazines, as static pieces of information, and we broadcast that out into the world. And then we finally figured out many years later that we could use it as a two-way bridge between people, and having people create and co-create and crowdsource and all those wonderful ideas that came about through those affordances that internet technology gives us. And so the same kind of transition that some struggle, some good things, some bad things is happening in higher universities all over the world. And some universities are riding with that change. Some universities are trying to resist that change or go back to some form of it. And different teachers and professors and students are having their own journey through this as well. Let me just start by talking a little bit about my background here. And so you can get a little bit of context of what you can be expecting to hear from me today. My name's Eric Hawkinson. Please call me Eric. I'm Associate Professor of Learning, Design, and Technology here at Kyoto University of Foreign Studies. That's my day job. I teach classes at the intersection of technology, tourism, and kind of learning and development. The school I teach at here is called the School of Global Tourism and School of Global Studies. It's an all-English program here in Kyoto, Japan. I also coordinate research for MAVER, Mixed Augmented Virtual Realities and Learning, for the past, we've been going for about 5 years or so. We're a small group, mostly based here in Japan, and most of our group is concentrated on the use of virtual and augmented reality in language acquisition. A lot of our members are working with virtual reality in the use of learning English as a second language here in Japan. My interest is mostly in augmented reality and informal learning, and I often think about the future, where this is all heading. And a lot of things are changing, and COVID is really accelerating. And a lot of things that I've been thinking about are coming true a lot faster than I once thought that was happening. I also founded a company, and I provide, design, consult on the use of immersive technology, augmented, virtual, mixed, diminished reality, what have you, in the use of study abroad programs, in online curriculum, and in online events as well. And I also am a big fan of TED. That might come up today a couple of different ways. TEDx Kyoto I volunteer a lot of time with TEDx Kyoto, designing media and the use of augmented virtual realities to help us do events. And so all these graphics that you see today and all the ways that I'm presenting to you and some of the virtual environments you might see today, a lot of them were designed with events and how to get us, connected a little bit better online as we go through today. I'm looking at you guys again today, and I want to get to know you just slightly as we get to going here. How many of you have used VR? Could you raise your hands there in the audience? How many of you are VR users? Nobody? Is that nobody? You're all shaking your heads. You've never used virtual reality. Has anyone used augmented reality? For example, have you used a Pokemon Go? Anybody play Pokemon Go? Ah, there's a few people. Is there a lot of rare Pokemon to be caught where you're at? Anyway, that is a form of augmented reality. So, is there anybody in the audience that maybe has used augmented reality or created something in virtual reality, augmented reality, maybe for your classes you're teaching or as a student in one of your projects? Has anybody tried to use or create something using these technologies? No? All right, so we have a fairly kind of uninitiated group with us today in the audience. That's good. I mean, I would like to then try to build some context for us as we move forward around these technologies and what's happening with it. Maybe show some trends and what's happening with this technology before we get into some projects and things that are happening around the world using these things, especially in educational contexts. So the plan I had for today was I was going to build some context for us. Right, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that than I usually do, and I have some projects that I'd like to share with you. And then there's one kind of call to action that I really want to help you guys, and that is around the idea of using virtual reality to kind of claw back some of these opportunities our students are missing out on because of travel restrictions and study abroad and internships and research programs and community engagement. All this stuff that our university has done is really not happening at all, unfortunately, and it's a really horrible situation for our students. So I'm really trying hard to push these technologies in a way that it's helpful, the way that it's not just about using the technology, it's actually trying to get back some of the things that are really important when we get our students traveling overseas or getting to be immersed in touching new ideas and cultures and people around the world. I'm going to may go a little bit fast, and so I'm going to be putting things into the chat. So I don't know if you guys have access to the chat there. I'm sure there's somebody there that can help you. If you have questions, you can also reach me at links that I'll be putting into the chat. So maybe you can get a transcript of the chat later. I'm also going to be probably displaying some items from the chat from either YouTube, because I'm also broadcasting to my students on YouTube today, and also with you as well. So you can see some of the chats on the screen there as well. All right, so that's what I hope to accomplish today. We're going to talk a little bit about AR, VR first, and especially its connection to educational contexts. All right, well, it's probably easiest for those of you that never have used virtual augmented reality, especially in classrooms, to think of it as an evolution in communication technology. We have all these kind of steps that we went through when we use these technologies for teaching, for learning, to express ourselves, to communicate with each other, from print to recordings and movies to radio and television broadcasts, live broadcasts, and then we evolved again, having all those things in our pockets with our cell phones, right? All the prints of the books and the movies and the radio and the television got carried around in our pockets. And so now we're going into new and immersive media, which is, you can consider it a new evolution, a new step in how we integrate, how we use technology to communicate and see the world. Realities, plural, is what we're going to be thinking about instead of media. And our reality is it's going to blend much more deeply with the media that we create and use. So you can imagine in this era, the mobile and internet era, all these prior things are in our pockets. We carry around with us. We're already kind of cyborgs in a way because we depend on these devices for communications. Our brains are kind of linked to them in many ways, especially from research from social media and how we use these technologies to help augment our brain to remember things. But now all these things are going to be coming out of our pockets. All these movies and tweets and all these 3D models and meshes and are going to be coming out of our pockets and connecting to people and places and things and emotions and moods and curated and mixed into our real world in new ways that we really haven't really begun to imagine quite yet. So it's going to be bringing media into things around the world to you, and also you being immersed and putting inside of the media, as it were. So it's going to be mixing and melding them together. So if you want to think as a as an educator, as a teacher, um, all these kind of steps, these evolutions in media use in the classroom, or when you create things to engage with people, they require a different skill set, right? So if you're writing something, you want to be a wordsmith. You want to be able to eloquently arrange the words and spell them correctly and make it so you can communicate your ideas through those words. And also when we kind of go down the list, we have new ways of communicating, and we're not really taking away from anything that came before it. We're just adding some things possibly as options to what before. So any step along the way doesn't really mean that we still don't need wordsmiths, or we still don't need people that can enunciate and sing. It just means that we have other options to integrate and uh, introduce concepts and ideas that might go well with whatever we're trying to teach or whatever we're trying to learn, right? So in scenery as actors, you can use your voice, right? You can convey things. You can use your gestures, and we can start, when we start to get to the television era, we can use camera angles and a couple of different camera movie tricks to help us kind of see and imagine new ideas and tell stories. Television and radio also broadcasted ubiquitously to large numbers of people, so we all kind of got a same reference of reality. We all kind of had the same information to base our conversations on in the morning, or when we engaged with our friends outside in the real world. That kind of started to change a little bit with new media. So now everybody has their own television studios in their pockets. Now we're all creating things. We're all adding to the conversation. We're not just listening to the broadcast. We're all part of it. And that means that we're all making TikTok dance videos and introducing our own ideas and starting to create our own little realities and echo chambers and bubbles around the information we both receive and put out into the world. And now we're going to be adding that to a new kind of understanding, a new way of thinking when it comes to thinking about getting information to our students or learning new information. We can create it, or we can go to creators that are a community of creators that have been creating it, or we can hop into an environment, someone that's created a new reality to connect to yours, to change the way you're viewing the world, or to change your world directly, or go into a new world and have that environment, have that area, have the people around it reflect what you're trying to learn, be curated for your level of interest or the abilities that you're bringing to it. It's more highly contextualized. It's more knowing of what you need and what you know, and um, it's more connected to all the things around you and what you are needing to know. So, like connecting that to all the things prior to it, all the skills too. Hopefully that's making a little bit of sense. But if you want to think about it in the simplest terms, it's a bridge. All these immersive technologies are a bridge between your real life, everything that's happening in the real world, all the things and data collected from the real world, and digital content that are maybe from the past, or stories that are created, movies, video, all that stuff that I talked about earlier. It's going to be a bridge to go back and forth from these two different types. And that's why it's called realities, plural, because we're going to have a spectrum of realities that depends on how much digital contents and how much real life we're using at any given point in time. My background has changed. I'm using a green screen. I'm not even there in person, so we're not even in real life right now, because you and I are engaging in through a bunch of different digital mediums right now. So you can see how that's going to be pushing further into the truth. Even maybe in the future, I could come sit next to you as a hologram, or I'm appearing in person next to you, or you are projected into me, my virtual world, for example. So all of these things in the future, artificial intelligence, cloud and edge computing, which is really going to be a key technology to make this work. Internet of Things, all the things that are collecting data about us, your Alexa and your door switches and your cameras, all that stuff that needs to collect the information to make these technologies work, and 3D printing. It's my contention that as these technologies, these emerging technologies come to the forefront, become more ubiquitous, become more widespread, augmented and virtual reality is going to be the preferred mode of communication to get things both from these technologies and get your thoughts, get input things into these technologies. We already see this in artificial intelligence. If you drive a Tesla, which is not yet, but they're starting to be self-driving cars. The reason they're becoming self-driving cars is because they are being trained by real drivers right now. So your real life driving, the data is being sucked in about how you drive. The cameras on the car are taking in movements of other cars, items, and they're feeding into the learning algorithms of the self-driving into the future. And then we can see this happening with people using VR as well. We're sucking up more data through these technologies, but also conveying new ideas and stories and experiences through these technologies as well. As I go through this, if anybody has any questions, you can always raise your hand or put it into the chat. I'd love to respond to them as we go further through today's topic. So I can see in the chat we don't really have anything to convey at the moment. All right, so we're going to have to think about this as educators, as teachers, as designers of curriculum. We can think about where we are on this spectrum. You're in the real world. Do you want students to learn about things that are happening right here and right now? Maybe you're a language teacher, or do you want to go completely virtual, completely simulated? If you're teaching perhaps maybe biology or surgery, you can put a student in a simulation that's completely generated, not even real one bit, and have a simulation about how to conduct a surgery or what it's like to be inside of a cell. And we're going to think about all this moving forward in the design of our curriculum. And we're probably going to need to be somewhere in the middle here between augmented reality, augmented virtually. What kind of things do we want to actually augment as far as the realities of our students, of our people in our learning environments, or how much do we want to take that away? And as we move to the future, even some schools here in Japan are having, kind of these technology sabbaticals where we're not allowing students to bring their devices to school, or we're not having any technology being used, at least for certain parts of the school year, or maybe not at all, because we want to give our students the real world experience and training that they might need moving towards the future. Anybody know what this is? This is one of my most favorite games in virtual reality. This is me in my lab in here in Kyoto. You can kind of see me in a virtual world. This is virtual reality. What I see, a bunch of blocks flying at me, and I'm just holding some controllers, but everything that's all my body movement, it's being taken in by my computer and then projected through me. And so now I'm listening to music and I'm using lightsabers to break things. And so you can see my computer also has a virtual camera behind me, and I'm the real person inside of that virtual space being broadcasted. And I use this also in my classes as an example. This is me in front of a virtual camera. You can see down here, this is what it looks like just in my lab, a green screen behind me, but I'm in a virtual environment trying to explain what a tesseract is, which is a four-dimensional object trying to be represented in 3 dimensions. And I'm showing what I'm looking at and being able to express that kind of spatial acuity, what it's like, the dimensions of it. So you can imagine this could be very useful in an art class or a physics class or um, maybe an engineering class, being able to kind of build worlds, build environments, build things right in front of students and get different angles on it, different approaches. This is not, of course, ideal for all classes. I wouldn't say that, for example, language learning might not be suited for that. And I'm a person that often thinks technology shouldn't be used for technology's sake. That's why I use this tesseract as an idea, because a tesseract is a really mind-bending idea of 4 dimensions. And so it's hard to kind of put your mind around it. So virtual reality really helps us visualize that and brings it to the forefront. But really, if a pencil and paper is all you really need to teach a subject, I'm all for that. A lot of times people look at what I'm doing and think, well, that's nice, but I don't need it. And sometimes you don't, honestly. This is a augmented reality application I developed about 5 years ago, and this is kind of the Pokemon Go side of the spectrum, and I see the potential in this much more than the virtual reality, honestly. This is a set of playing cards, and you can connect any kind of digital contents to them. So I'm looking through a smartphone right now, and the real world is, of course, it's just a camera looking at these images. And as these images are being recognized by a computer vision algorithm, it's displaying video, audio, 3D models, web content, whatever you'd like to show on top of these items. And I've taken this project, and our tourism students are using them to create kind of curated experiences and tours all over Japan. So you show up at a temple here in Kyoto, and you want to get the tour in a language, or you want to get the tour related to a specific hobby or an interest you have. You can curate and get different information from the same place, depending on your interests or where you are, all this extra data that's being collected about you or that you input. So we can see that this can curate and specialize information depending on how you go through these environments. There are a whole bunch of benefits. Immersive learning is a term that we're coming down on in the way of the research that's going on around this technology. Immersive learning is just the use of augmented, virtual, and all these new kind of terms coming out in realities, plural, in educational contexts. And so we can see some of these benefits already coming to bear in some of the research coming out in the last 5 to 10 years. Special education, it's being a lot of promising things in use in social anxiety, autism, PTSD, dyslexia, and other kind of learning disabilities. On the other end of that, though, a lot of these technologies like virtual and augmented reality are very calibrated to our biological systems. So a lot of people that are perhaps not in the more kind of normal range of our human kind of configuration. For example, a lot of virtual reality is dependent on your interpupillary distance, how you move your head and arms, and sometimes special people have some issues trying to use these as well. But it can be used right. It can be a very good tool for a lot of special education needs. We're getting a lot of learning analytics. What students look at, how they engage with things can be understood at a much deeper level. But on the other end of that, there are a lot of concerns about collecting these datas, because now that we know that if you can kind of get a sense of where our eyes are moving, or a sense of how our body's moving, we can actually diagnose people. If you wear a headset for 15 minutes, we can almost kind of tell if you have a learning disability of some type. And there's a lot of consequences if you're a institution, being able to have access to that data and being able to, if it gets leaked, for example. There's even studies out there that suggest that you can tell a person's sexual preference if given enough tracking data in virtual reality, or know their predilection for addictions by showing them images of like tobacco or illicit drugs and how they gaze their eyes on them and for a time or being. So maybe you're not even conscious of some of these things that you're doing with your eyes and your body, but the algorithms these days can possibly diagnose some of these things. But my favorite thing is the idea of immersion and the empathy machine. There's some people in our research group that are doing studies to see the voice of academic writing after being immersed in virtual reality. One study that I like to quote a lot from one of our research members, they were talking about refugees in Japan in an academic writing class. And refugees are not typically welcomed in Japan. Japan is wonderful in the respect of going out in the world and giving and trying to support the world and issues of refugees, but refugees actually being able to immigrate into the country is very, very, very rare. So there's not a lot of opportunity for Japanese students to actually come in contact with refugees, especially in Japan. And so using virtual reality, students were put into kind of a journey of what it's like for a refugee to leave, for example, Syria, or try to leave Central America and try to journey to the United States. And just after going through these experiences, she was able to analyze significant changes in the way that their ideas were represented in their academic writing. So they really built up empathy. Just comparing, going into VR and having that little bit of agency, having that little bit of just being able to move your head and make actions and looking through the perspective of another person, really connected humans to that engagement and that idea and that media, that content, in a much deeper way than looking at a video or reading a book could. So that's a lot of interesting things, and hopefully I'm going to bring that back to a project that I'd like to invite you all into to participate in. Of course, then we have some issues. We have some problems around this technology. Privacy, automation, psychological. I have a whole host of research papers and YouTube videos and other things that I'd like to share with you about this. I don't have the time to go through that, but what I'm going to do now is I just put in a couple of links into the chat. Hopefully somebody can share those with you a little bit later. I put together a series on the metaverse, especially Mark Zuckerberg's version of the metaverse. For example, privacy concerns with social media, with our mobile phones, people having a camera with them at all times, being able to use it. What if that camera is just on all the time? We're already moving into this with our microphones on all the time, listening to us, and that data could be used nefariously. Psychological terms, we're already seeing this in the mobile world as well, like these compulsion loops in social media, that these apps are designed in a way to keep us coming back, keep us scrolling as much as possible so we can be more engaged. These engagement algorithms are measuring how we're reacting to different things that are being shown to us and showing us more of it. This can be, of course, because of that immersion effect, that psychological effect, that empathy machine, can be amplified if the design of these technologies as you use these medias are used. So anything that you see happening in the mobile world, any of these kind of ill effects that might be happening with students being distracted in class, for example, can be exacerbated when we start using these technologies more. Automation is another. I often talk about the automation of the learning process, the automation of inquiry, just the simple act of being able to ask questions, because this technology is curating things for us more and more. These technologies. For example, if in the past we were talking about a Google search, you put in some text, which is not a lot of data, and you get back 10,000 possible websites with tons and tons of information. If you take that forward into a Google Assistant, a voice assistant, you give up your voice, you give up your location, you give up a lot of psychological things that can be taken from how your voice is compared to voices, your voice, how it sounds in the past. All that information, which is much more about you, is now curated into one answer given to you by your voice assistant. And that answer is dictated by whoever controls the algorithms behind what's giving you that answer. So how we start to be able to have our students give them the ability to ask the right questions and go through the very process of inquiry is going to be starting to be an issue, I think, moving forward, as all of this information is going to start to be curated for us in a level that we've never seen before using these technologies. All right, here's a couple of projects I'd like to introduce to you now around these technologies. But first, I'd like to ask you, is there anything that I've said so far that is unclear? I'm also I lost my camera. I got a weird pose. Let me turn that off for a second. Oh boy. That was a little awkward. Sorry, guys. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and show you and share with a couple of projects that I've been working on that kind of give an example so you can see what's going on with these technologies moving towards the future. Right, Why Me project, Fukushima AR Rally, big project. I'm going to go through these really fast, but I will put links into the chat so you can look at these later on. Interactive web publishing, immersive tourism workshop, game-based tourism, digital literacy. These are all some of the classes that I've designed for our university, for our new curriculum, our new department, and that I'm teaching. And all of these classes have some element of immersive technology with them. So these are some of the classes that I think actually bode well for a lot of these technologies. Like I said, this technology may not be necessary or even needed in many educational contexts. It depends on what you're trying to teach and how you're trying to teach it, of course. Fukushima AR Rally 2017, we also did it in 2016. Augmented reality is bringing digital things into where you are. And so your phone knows where you are, what you're looking at, who you're with, and you can use that premise to put digital things into your reality to kind of guide people, to get people engaged in the real world. We often see this with Pokemon Go, right? It got people off the couch, and now you're off chasing Pikachu onto the streets of wherever you live. So I took this and we had 200 students in our community engagement program. We're trying to get students out into the real world, doing some civic duty, getting to know the local businesses, art galleries, museums, and getting engaged with the community. And so our new freshmen get paired up with a couple of upperclassmen and then some people volunteers that come in from the city, and they get sent to City Hall and the Disaster Prevention Center, the Flood Museum, to learn about the history, and the Citizen Plaza, where you learn about some of the things, programs that are happening in the city. And so it's almost like a gamified tour. We had a mission control, and I had a group of students that were doing a study with me around this, where we were sending groups out all over the city. And as soon as they got to different locations, they got missions based on those locations. So for example, this is the Fukushima Plaza that we're looking at now. You come in, and this is the orientation app that I developed you a mission to go through this environment. And then as you go through the environment, there are things on the walls about the history of the city, and the app is asking you to look at that and translating that information from Japanese into English for you, as everything, of course, in this area is all in Japanese. It's kind of curating it depending on who's taking this and try and get people to actually physically work together in a group. So this is a team of students and community members going through the city, and they get to meet, council members and learn a little bit about the city and engage. So this actually happened 3 years running, and before I moved away from the city, and now I'm using this technology in many similar ways on campus, kind of a smart campus way. So now you're seeing some of the overlays of the English over the Japanese signs using augmented reality here as well. I took a lesson from TED, one of my favorite TED Talks by Candy Chang. It's called Before I Die, where she's taking walls of abandoned homes because people fled the area due to Katrina. It was a very horrible hurricane that flooded half the city. And she wrote these signs on here, Before I Die. And it becomes kind of a public art space. Anyone can go up to the walls and chalk and write something they'd like to do before they die. And so a community can get to know each other a little bit better. They're kind of like community art spaces. So I took this idea and used augmented reality, created a space with this augmented reality app. Students write a quick message of what they'd like to do before they graduate on this wall. They slap a sticker that is connected through augmented reality to a video testimonial that they add to their message. A 1-minute message, could be a little bit longer. And so students come up, there's maybe a tablet or two, an iPad or something here. They see a note or a message on the wall, I want to something, and they want to know more about that student. They just look at the sticker next to it. The video pops out at them. This becomes a semi-private way to share video information as well, because it's not on YouTube or anything. If it is, it's set privately, so you don't have the link to it. And you can message them or encourage them or have students meet each other through a physical space on campus. And this became a book, actually. There's my message. My dream is to help your dreams, was my dream that year. And so the wall disappeared, but the data lives on. And so the book now, students are able to go back and see if their dreams really happened. This was in 2017, and this is actually viewing it through the application I developed, where you can kind of overlay the video content and the essays and the messages from the actual wall are actually still here and still alive, even though that physical space is gone. So there's on the back of the book is telling you how to use it, and then that information is now displayed on top of it as well. All of these projects that I showed, you guys can participate in, and I really want and hope that we can get students. One of my big things, one of the reasons I come and speak to you today is because I want to get our students engaging with each other, especially now that we can't travel. So I've developed some online platforms, online courses, and all these projects that I'm sharing with you today. I'm hoping that you might consider getting yourselves or your students involved in as well, so we can get them some experience in engaging with each other, especially my students here in Japan, with perhaps your students there in Borneo. Why Me project is similar. I'm going to skip over this one for now. It's also a good one, togetherlearning.com, Why Me, if you want to know more information. Here is the project that I'm really excited about, and I want to share with you my hometown project using virtual reality which started off in 2018 as a way for our students to get some vocational training in the tourism and hospitality industry. Getting students the chance to create, curate, design a tour of their hometowns, something that they should be an expert on, and curating that and giving it to their classmates. So going through the process of creating, designing a tour, practicing the art of storytelling, and guiding and entertaining people as well, was kind of big skills in the tourism and hospitality industry. And that turned, when we hit the pandemic, we were doing this in class. We had to pivot very quickly. I designed some new systems, some new online delivery aspects to it, and it's become so much better. These technologies really can be pushed into what we're doing now online. And so now students are creating tours of their hometowns all over the world, and now we can share them and hop into them asynchronously and kind of get some of that empathetic first world looking through somebody else's eyes of little hometowns all over the world, which is a type of tourism that we couldn't do or wouldn't do that much even before the pandemic. We often go to, the famous tourist spot, the famous temple here in Kyoto. Now you can come and sit on a bench on some random park in a suburb of Kyoto and learn how somebody got their first kiss, or saw a beautiful rare crane for the first time, or experienced a festival in their hometown for the first time. All of these beautiful stories are now being shared through this project, and I think the affordances of this technology are really being strengthened and brought through this technology, through this project. So it's an exchange program in virtual reality. It's turned into a lot of things that are happening now with exchange programs, trying to augment the disappearance of real travel, are these kind of open Zoom sessions. And Zoom fatigue is a real thing. Microsoft brought it up 2 years ago, and other researchers have since confirmed. Too much Zoom, too much lecturing makes us tired, makes us remember less, and a whole bunch of other kind of ill learning side effects of using Zoom, overusing Zoom. This is not a Zoom thing at all. It's just it's the creation of media. It's not the consumption of media as much. It's being able to learn to share your perspective, your view of the world, and communicate that with others. And this technology can really help you do that in a new, interesting way. What we're looking at now is just a kind of a preview video of what we're doing in this. It's a virtual exchange and travel program. Students are making tours. I'm going to go ahead and skip that for now. Some of you may be interested in the research behind this. A lot of our research group here in Japan, the MAVER group that I told you about, we're collaborating on this project. It iterated in several different steps, from mobile VR to web VR, and now I've created my own platform on this, trying to push into these ideas of keeping things private and safe and secure for educational contexts, which the big players like Facebook, which are the devices are cheap, are really looking to supplement their business models with your increased amount of data through these devices. Anyway, so it started maybe in 2018, and then we had our first run in 2019 July, and then we've had a bunch of iterations, and we're going to have our next one starting soon, which I'm going to invite you guys and you and your students to get involved in online as well. This is what it looked like at the beginning, right? We have one student here with an iPad, and they're looking at maybe some neighborhood where they grew up, and a bunch of other students are in class sitting around them, and they're telling them about where they grew up, and they're saying, look over here, look over there, this is where I grew up, and then they add different elements of media inside of these tours. And so they're giving them live with the aid of virtual reality. So this is like synchronous tours. And even in this situation, students are feeling that they feel more connected with their classmates, because it's really intimate to visit someone's hometown, to go to their and hear about their childhood memories. And so a lot of students felt closer. They're reporting that they felt closer to their classmates through this kind of activity. But we stopped this when the pandemic hit. We were no longer getting into the classroom. We were doing emergency remote teaching. So I had to pivot this even more deeply to be online. So it became an online course, which was mostly asynchronous. But we also did help sessions in Twitch, which I'm a big proponent on using, and Discord and other tools. And so we go through this 10-week course, and then I was able to invite other students from other countries and other institutions into this program, and that's when it really started to take off into something special. We have togetherlearning.com, which is developed just for this, with the course materials, online discussions. We do things on Twitch and Discord live for live help. And of course, maybe I mentioned, maybe I didn't, these technologies still need some internet bandwidth. They still need some higher end devices, not necessarily, the latest laptop or a gaming PC or anything like that, but um, you can experience them with a phone. But if you want to create these experiences, you need something. You need a PC at least, or maybe an older Mac to work with these things. So that puts an extra oomph on the digital divide. That's one of the things I've been thinking really heavily about, especially here in Japan, as we introduce these things. Even in a country like Japan, we are finding there's a big gap between the haves and haves not in bandwidth of internet and devices and being able to use the internet and the literacy to use it correctly. So this is happening all over the world, and I'm sure this is something that you are thinking about as well. Somebody in a rural area, a lot of people think when this technology hits, somebody in a rural area is going to be able to travel instantly using virtual reality. But of course, you need more bandwidth. You need more stronger and larger bandwidth data to use these technologies. So they may not be necessarily true. So in many cases, you need to kind of lower the level of technology to make it more accessible. So there's a little bit of catch-22 with this technology. On one end, it brings a lot of things that could be more expensive, like learning surgery and being able to not being able to travel. But on the other side of things, you still need slightly more advanced technology, slightly better internet bandwidth to use it. We did some research behind this. We did a bunch of user analytics and do pre and post surveys. So most of that information is available on research that's already been published. I'll put some links, of course, in the chat as well. Some of the things the students are saying, I've already mentioned. They feel closer. They feel like they can express themselves in their second language a little bit better through these technologies, because the way the technology is showing the story is through their eyes. And so they're telling the story through their eyes because the media matches their perspective of their voice of telling the story. And so they feel closer. They want to share more. There's a bit of novelty effect at the beginning of these. And students, I feel that we're starting to gather a little bit more data about this. It's still a little bit unclear, but it seems it's very promising that this technology lends itself to transferring information, transferring new skills into that new kind of use case. For example, if a student trains and uses a virtual reality tour to train how to create and give VR tours, it seems that they're more likely to transfer and be better at doing that in real life than just perhaps giving a PowerPoint presentation. So this is what it looks like now. The workshop, is this a video? No, it's not. I made these virtual reality constructs, and you can go into VR and touch things. If you have a headset, you can use it. If you have your phone, you don't have to. You could just view it. And we have 8 countries, 4 institutions that were in this last run, and we're doing another run beginning of next year. We have a couple of testimonials. One's in Japanese. I won't show that one, but I will share with you one from South Sumatra. Maybe you can't hear that video. I doubt you can hear that audio. So what I'm going to do is just going to paraphrase for Shafira. She was saying she joined from the University of Gajah Mada in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And she was saying how she was able to kind of augment and learn some skills about showing her tour in English and be able to share and preview this tour. So she saw this as a way as for promotion of tourism in her area, and also to kind of give her new skills in being able to share and represent special areas of her hometown to possible visitors and kind of start to develop destination tourism in her area. It was like a step into that world for her. This is one of our students here at the Kyoto University of Japan, Akari Sone, and she was talking about how this really helped her express herself in English. She wasn't really that confident in English, and she was very surprised that because she's an expert of her hometown and she had a little bit of confidence in the stories to tell and the way that we kind of train and kind of hone in on storytelling through immersive technologies, she was able to kind of express herself in a way that she was surprised at. This was also in a TED Talk just recently. My contacts and friends in TEDx Chiang Mai. I also will put a link to that into the chat as well. You can view the latest TED Talk about this project on TEDx Chiang Mai that was released just 2 months ago. So what I would like to do is invite you guys. Yes, I'm talking about you guys. If you are a teacher or if you are interested in cultural exchange, we are starting this program up again next year. Between January and April, you can learn how to create a tour of your hometown, wherever that might be, where you grew up, learn how to tell stories about it, and give other people around the world the opportunity to visit that place and learn about your stories and the place where you grew up. And you can come visit us here in Japan through this exchange as well. So it's a whole new way of kind of visiting and exchanging ideas through this kind of technology. So you can contact me through email or one of the links that are in the chat, or you can visit several of the home pages that I started up today. So we're going to be starting up again very soon, and I'm hoping, I would love to hear some of the stories and some of the things in your area about what it's like to grow up there or live there or eat at a restaurant or play with friends. I'm learning so much about what it's like to kind of just live in different places all around the world through this project. So please consider participating, not only as a teacher with your students, but maybe as an individual to learn how to use these technologies a little bit better and to tell your story. Here's my information, togetherlearning.com/myhometown. That's my email, erickhawkinson.com/@gmail. You can contact me or visit this website. I already put the links into the chat as well. Some of the projects that I talked about today, there's also some other projects that doing some research around using immersive technology, augmented virtual reality. I would love to get our students here at Kyoto University of Foreign Studies involved more with the students there at Swinburne through these projects, or even more. There's a couple of other things that I'd like to talk about. Some of the administration of your university, or about starting up some immersive laboratories, a new way of making a laboratory that's around these technologies, that's not the traditional PC library, PC setup that maybe some, like, for example, Call or Mall. This is something new that we're developing, and I think if we have some institutions that are partner with us, like you at Swinburne, we can get more out of it because we can connect our students together through these technologies, through our campuses using these technologies. So that's something I'd really like to discuss with teachers and administration at this particular university. Again, my name's Eric. You can find my research and all these projects that I mentioned today on my personal website, erickhawkinson.com. I'd be really happy if you connected with me on social media, your favorite one. I know you guys use WhatsApp a lot. That's the one I don't use that much. We don't use it a lot here in Japan. But please feel free to reach out, even if it's nothing more than just to say hello. And I see that I'm just about out of time. There's a couple of comments in our YouTube live chat. I'm going to be answering directly through the chat. I see you there. And if you have any questions there live, maybe they can help me as well. I think I have just maybe a couple more minutes. Let me also just say thanks very much for being with me and thanks for listening today. Yes. Excellent. I think I heard 90% of that question. I think I got the gist of it. What the doctor's saying there is the issue of Society 5.0, or more or less, sometimes we hear this as smart cities or smart locations, smart urban areas, especially when it relates to Japan. Smart cities is a little bit funny. When we think about the integration of collecting data for the betterment of society, it's hit a lot of roadblocks. A lot of the times, these initiatives are started by companies. For example, one of the biggest ones was Google tried to invest billions of dollars in a community outside of Vancouver, which the residents ultimately rejected later on. A lot of things in Japan are happening also around that same thing. The initiatives are being started largely around innovative companies like Sony and other companies are trying to create areas to experiment with these. But the, I would say it's not resistance, the caution of Japanese society through the lens of technology is a little bit higher. And also, the development of older technologies is so well established that it's sometimes, in some ways, it might be harder to start these technologies because there's a knowing of the intrusion of privacy, the data collection, and other issues, and also the older technologies and the businesses and business models behind them, that it's hard to kind of switch those things over and start to really integrate in meaningful ways, the use of augmented reality, artificial intelligence into a more kind of smart city, society 5.0 situation. Woven City is something that I would like you to look into. Woven City is a very big project in central Japan, close to Mount Fuji, where several companies have banded together and they have a large swath of land and they're inviting people to come live voluntarily. That's why they're getting around some of these issues around legal and ethical concerns to practice and kind of develop a lot of these technologies that you might think are involved in a society 5.0, where we're going to be monitoring people's movements, traffic movements, the use of water, electricity, and recyclability and things like that to kind of gauge and analyze to help better ourselves, our lives, our health moving towards the future. But you might imagine that Japan's way ahead on this, but I would imagine there's a couple places in the world, especially places like Singapore and maybe even some cities that you wouldn't think, because it's they're emerging technologically. There's not a lot already established. It might be easier if a place doesn't have a lot to kind of quickly move into these places a little bit better. China is also a big example of that, especially in rural areas as well. Hopefully that answers your question. Great, thank you. Woven City, please look into it. Could you please repeat the first part of that? Yeah, that is something that a lot of teachers are struggling with, right? In my current institution, the president and other kind of decision makers are not very aware of these kind of emerging technologies that much, or at least they don't see how it can be utilized right now. When I first started this 10 years ago, it was even worse in a rural college where I started this. But I had the freedom to start doing small things on my own. And after it took several years of kind of doing these smaller projects, like the one on the wall, the before I graduate project, before we got to the point where we were doing these big rallies using 200 plus students with the help of the university. So it took several years of me showing smaller projects to allow me to do bigger projects using the technology. And now I'm running into similar things with my current institution as well. Been putting forth, new ideas all the time. Of course, when I see this technology, it's moving so fast. I want to move fast too. But if I can see it also from the point of an administrator, there's a lot of legal, ethical, budgetary concerns that go along with it, and not all the stakeholders might be aligned with it. The community around our institution, the collection of more data from our students, and the responsibilities of privacy. There's a lot of kind of things to consider, so I can understand why it's not met with the enthusiasm that I feel around this technology well. But I understand it, and I'm always working to try and help people understand and mitigate some of those risks and move forward. So yes, I've had issues trying to implement these things. Students, on the other hand, tend to really cling to them, especially at the beginning. There's a lot of novelty effect. But getting to the place where it's being used at its best, that's why I'm very excited about this My Hometown project, because it's really bringing out what this technology can give us rather than just having something fancy to show on a PR video or something like that. Hopefully that answers the question. If if anybody wants to take me with them into the tea break room and chat with me, I'll stick around for a couple more minutes. No pressure, just if you want to. Thanks, everybody. Those of you watching on YouTube Live, thanks very much. I'm going to end the stream now. Please reach out if you want to know more about these projects or the research. Thanks. Bye.